The streets of Manila were alive with the chaos of daily life, vendors shouting their wares, jeepneys honking as they navigated the narrow lanes, and children running barefoot across the cracked concrete. In the midst of it all, a young boy stood alone, his tattered shirt clinging to him in the humid afternoon air, a worn guitar strapped across his thin shoulders. His hands were rough and scarred from years of practice on strings that had long since lost their newness, yet his fingers moved with surprising precision. Each note he played cut through the ambient noise of the street, a pure, soulful melody that seemed almost impossible to come from someone so young and so impoverished. People paused, some out of curiosity, others because they were drawn in by a beauty that transcended their everyday struggles. His eyes were fixed on nothing in particular, closed as he poured every ounce of his being into the song, and tears welled up despite his attempts to remain focused. A few meters away, a talent scout for Ireland's Got Talent observed silently, her notebook forgotten in her hand. She had been in Manila for weeks, seeking stories and voices that could touch a global audience, yet few had left a mark. But this boy, with his raw voice and unpolished charm, demanded attention. The scout felt a lump in her throat as she watched him. Each chord, each trembling note carried a story of hardship, of streets run barefoot, of evenings spent under dim lights with little food, yet a boundless passion for music. Vendors and passers-by were drawn in, some stopping their work, some leaning against carts, all seemingly held captive by the purity of his performance. Even a group of children playing nearby paused mid-chase, their eyes wide and mouths slightly open, captivated by the voice that seemed too mature for the boy's fragile frame. As the song progressed, his emotions began to break through. He faltered on a note, swallowed hard, and tears spilled down his cheeks, unashamed. The melody wavered for only a moment before he regained control, his voice now richer for the raw emotion it carried. The scout's eyes glistened. She instinctively scribbled notes, but the words felt inadequate to capture the gravity of what she was witnessing. The boy's song ended softly, fading into the chatter of the market, leaving behind a stunned silence that spoke louder than applause ever could. A few people clapped hesitantly, unsure if they were clapping for him or for the miracle of beauty they had just witnessed in such unlikely circumstances. The scout approached him carefully, not wanting to startle him, and gently introduced herself, explaining the opportunity that awaited him. The boy looked up, eyes still wet, his voice barely above a whisper, "Me. You really think I can?" The scout smiled, heart heavy with emotion, knowing she had just found someone who could make judges halfway across the world weep with nothing but the power of a single, soulful voice and a lifetime of dreams waiting to be realized. The lights of the Ireland's Got Talent stage glowed bright and unforgiving, reflecting off the polished floor and the judges' expectant faces. From backstage, the young boy from Cebu adjusted the strap of his worn guitar, his fingers trembling slightly as they hovered over the strings. The tattered edges of his shirt and the holes in his old shoes made him look fragile against the glittering backdrop, yet there was an unmistakable fire in his eyes. As the host announced his name, the audience erupted into polite applause, but it felt distant to the boy, a world away from the streets he had grown up on. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a moment, and stepped into the spotlight, his heart pounding as the cameras panned over the judges and the crowd. The first chord rang out, hesitant at first, then stronger, weaving a melody that filled the theater with a raw, haunting beauty. The judges, seasoned performers and critics, leaned forward in their seats, their expressions a mixture of surprise and cautious curiosity. One judge's hand hovered near his mouth, trying to contain a gasp as the boy's voice soared with such purity and emotional depth it was almost unbearable to hear. Another judge's eyes shimmered, tears threatening to spill, while the youngest judge's brow furrowed in concentration, trying to process the weight of the story conveyed through the boy's music. Each note seemed to carry the boy's life on its shoulders, the hunger, the struggle, the endless nights of practice in dimly lit alleys, and the small victories that had brought him here. The audience, caught in the spell, grew silent, as if aware that they were witnessing something rare and unrepeatable. Midway through the song, the boy's voice wavered slightly, his emotions catching up to him. He swallowed hard, closed his eyes tighter, and let the tremor in his tone enhance the song's poignancy. One judge, unable to contain herself, dabbed at a tear streaking down her cheek, while another gripped the edge of the table, fighting the impulse to stand and embrace him. The camera zoomed in on the boy's face, capturing every tiny movement, every flicker of pain and hope that had shaped his journey. The melody swelled, rising and falling like the waves of the sea he had once crossed in his imagination to reach a better life. As the final chord lingered in the air, the theater erupted into a standing ovation, yet it felt reverent, almost sacred, rather than noisy or celebratory. The boy lowered his guitar slowly, tears streaming freely now, mixing with the sweat on his brow. He looked at the judges, seeing mirrored in their eyes the same astonishment and empathy he felt for his own story. One judge whispered, voice breaking, I've never felt anything like this." Another reached out instinctively, gently patting his shoulder, their hand trembling. For a brief moment, the boy felt the weight of every hardship, every rejection, every hungry night lift, replaced by a sense of triumph he had never imagined. He had stepped onto a stage meant for the world's best, and with nothing but his voice and a heart full of dreams, he had made even the toughest critics weep. The applause washed over him, but it was the judge's raw, honest emotion that left the deepest mark, confirming that his story, born from poverty and perseverance, had touched everyone who witnessed it. Backstage after the performance, the young boy from Cebu sank onto a worn chair, his fingers still clutching the guitar as if it were a lifeline. His chest heaved with exhaustion, and tears streaked his dirt-smudged cheeks, but his lips curved into a small, triumphant smile. Around him, the atmosphere buzzed with energy, crew members moving quickly, cameras flashing, but none of it seemed to touch him. All he could feel was the echo of the audience's awe and the judge's raw emotion. The judges themselves approached him, faces glistening from tears, eyes shining with admiration. One judge gently placed a hand on his shoulder, voice thick with emotion, saying, "You've changed all of us today. Never stop singing." Another whispered, almost in disbelief, "I've never heard anything so honest, so real." The boy nodded, too overwhelmed to speak, letting their words sink in like sunlight after years of darkness. In a quiet corner, his mother embraced him tightly, holding him as if she could shield him from every hardship he had endured. Her own eyes were wet, a mix of relief, pride, and awe. She had scrimped and saved, sacrificing every small comfort, just so he could follow this dream. Now, watching her son on the brink of something extraordinary, she allowed herself to feel the weight of those sacrifices. The boy's worn shoes pressed against her legs, and his guitar rested between them, an instrument that had carried him from the streets of Cebu to the world stage. Memories of performing in alleyways, singing for coins, and dreaming under dim streetlights filled his mind, each one a stepping stone that led him here. As the judges gathered around for photos and interviews, the boy noticed the audience members lingering at the edge of the stage, some holding hands, some wiping tears, all visibly moved. The realization hit him slowly. His voice, his life, and his story had reached beyond him, beyond Manila and Cebu, touching hearts across the globe. Cameras flashed as the boy gave a small, shy wave, and suddenly he understood the magnitude of what had just happened. Poverty, struggle, and countless sleepless nights had culminated in this moment of recognition. The lights of Davao, where he had dreamed of a better life, reflected in his eyes as if the entire city were shining through him, proud and hopeful. Later, as the boy and his mother stepped outside, the cool night air mixed with the adrenaline still racing through him. Fans lingered, journalists scribbled, and the boy felt a sense of belonging he had never known before. He looked at his worn guitar, his constant companion, and whispered a quiet promise to himself. No matter where life took him, he would never stop singing, never stop telling his story. That small voice from Cebu, once drowned in the streets' noise, had now moved a global audience to tears, inspired judges, and shown the world that talent and heart could shine brighter than circumstance. In that moment, poverty no longer defined him. Courage, passion, and a song had, and that truth felt infinite.